Hey, fellow tennis nerds, another episode of the Tennis Nerd Podcast. I'm here with Liya Davidov. I hope I pronounced that correctly. College tennis player, New Jersey, then went into journalism, professional writing. Now she's very active on Instagram. She writes for tennis.com, works for the tennis channel. So today we're going to talk a lot about tennis and her background in the sport. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. It's a great Friday over here. Can't complain.
I even forgot it was Friday, actually.
Every day this week has felt like a Thursday, so I'm thankful that it's no longer a Thursday.
Yeah, yeah. So what's you been up to this week? You have some tournaments you're working on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Every week there's at least four tournaments going on. Abu Dhabi was the big one. Cluj-Napoca, the Transylvania Open was great. And then there's a few for the men's side, like the Dallas Open, which is always exciting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, tennis never sleeps, right? So you go straight from Australian Open, and you're like, oh, that was a great slam, and then just next week you're like, okay, well, they have two WTA and one ATP, just to mention those.
Yeah, exactly. The night of, Sinner holds up the trophy and I'm back to work.
Yeah, yeah. So how is your day like? You're working for, I guess it's Tennis Channel officially, right? And you're writing for tennis.com. Like, do you have to keep up with everything? Do you single out certain tournaments or players or projects, or how do you put up your day?
Yeah, so tennis.com is within the Tennis Channel network. So I work on the plus side. So everything streaming wise in terms of Tennis Channel Plus, that's all me. Everything you're paying for, I make sure you get so you enjoy your service and you keep giving us money. And then I also work on the newsletter. So if you're subscribed to the weekly newsletter, that's all me. Have a face to the email. And I also write for tennis.com. So there's many tournaments going on. There's a bunch of editors and writers on scene 24/7. And anything from style points on baseline, which are more futuristic pieces and social drama that happens, to the hardcore news stuff. I'm your girl. Whatever comes our way, whoever doesn't grab it, it's first come, first serve. That's a lot of fun.
Do you have a niche that's kind of your favorite? Like, what this part of tennis I like the most, or covering this kind of stories?
Yeah, I really like the technical aspect of tennis across the board for pros. They might use the same grip, but they all have a different strategy. They all have a different gameplay. They all have different strengths on the court depending on how far back they are. Some of them like to close in. It's really fascinating to me how unique the sport is. It's such an individual sport, and it's true to how the individuals play the game.
Yeah,
So I
it's kind of
definitely
like
like getting into that.
yeah, it's MMA for with a tennis ball. I usually say like it's such a kind of mental game in between two players, and there's so many matchup questions, strategies that come into play, and then you have the surfaces, and then you have the conditions, and the travel, and there's so many variables all the time, right?
Exactly. There's so much off camera that fans don't get to see, and that we were hoping to see more of in Breakpoint from Netflix. And then, coming as a player myself, I just know that there's such a difference between getting to high school, getting to college, and then making that switch to pro. The commitment is undeniable, and it's truly fascinating the level and the eliteness that goes with it.
Did you ever want to go pro? Was that your plan? Like you play high level college, so
Um, it was definitely college for me, and I always pictured myself playing like a match on Arthur Ashe, but it's not that I saw myself going pro necessarily. It was always a love-hate relationship for me growing up because it's such an individual sport. It comes with its highs and very low lows. And I always knew, at least for myself, that there was a ceiling that I wouldn't get as far in terms of, my own status here, my other interests. I've kind of been doing a lot of things regardless, and I have other passions, and it's just a matter of combining them all and seeing the best fit for me.
yeah. So I mean, you studied journalism afterwards, which is what I did as well. How was that? Was that a natural choice for you to kind of like now you can combine these two, obviously, but was also journalism like a natural part of your studies?
Ironically, it wasn't. I went as a math major to college. I love everything about math, the study of it, the theories. But I was looking around the room and I was like, what am I doing here? Like, what am I gonna do with this? There's nothing interesting that I would want to take this somewhere. And writing has always been a passion of mine. I've been writing since I was a little girl, and it was kind of like an aha moment, like, let me study all things writing. So I did journalism, I did all things professional writing, creative writing. And it was actually when COVID hit that I had another aha moment where I stopped playing tennis. My college career was basically cut short, and I started writing about what it was like to be a student athlete who couldn't athlete anymore. And I ended up getting that published in New York Tennis Magazine, and that was like, wow, why not combine my love for writing with my love for tennis? I'm already so knowledgeable. That's truly where I could go. And from there, it was okay. How do I get into the tennis world? Where is my foot in? And that was ultimately a tennis channel. So that's how I kind of got to where I am today.
That's great. So it must be a lot of fun then because you can combine these two passions, and you might still want to do creative writing on the side. I'm not sure what your, preferences with writing, but you can at least, have fun at work, I guess,
Yeah, absolutely. I don't complain about the hours at all. I think it's a lot better than a 9 to 5. Instead, every week I'm surprised because my hours shift as the tournaments move around the world. And I get to write about tennis, which I'm very passionate about. I have enough time to also write for myself and even coach tennis on the side. So I get to a little bit of everything, and so far it's been treating me nice.
Do you still play like in a competitive way in some form?
Unfortunately, not at the level that I was training at, literally since COVID. Even when the world was starting to get back and, we were trying to get back into the semester routine and playing competitively, it was never back to where I was. But I do, play around with hitting partners around here who also kind of are in the same boat as me, just kind of want to keep hitting. I'm a great hitting partner for other players who are now training to go to college and even pro. And I coach on the side also, which is a fun hobby for me.
What do you think about coaching? Like what kind of students do you have? Do you have like rec players? Do you have competitive players?
All over. I started coaching when I was 14 at the club that I was training at. So for the days that I wasn't playing in their groups, I was coaching or even both, honestly. And it was so fascinating to be on the other side of the net. I think it improved my game a lot because I would recognize things in the opponent that I wouldn't have seen before. And I think it's really crucial. And I think a lot of coaches are starting to realize that not every player can be coached the same. And especially when you're working with little kids, they don't even understand what the sport is yet. And you have to get them engaged in it to want to hold up the racket a certain way and to trust you when you say, no, 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 let's change the grip this way. I know it's uncomfortable, but you got to trust me. A lot of times they just want to have fun. And that's kind of, you have to make that balance. And I work with high school players, recreational, literally anybody from 5 to 18 years old has been kind of my bread and butter, and it's a lot of fun. Truly, they make me want to get out there and play.
I think that's the part that you have to look at it like that. If you're a coach, you're also inspiring yourself to play. So partly you're getting your tennis fix in a way, but you're also getting like, I can maybe use this, or I learned something from my own coaching. Like you hear yourself talk, and you're like, I should do this more, maybe, right?
Yeah, exactly. Literally the other day I was on court and I heard another coach say something a certain way, and I was like, oh my God, like that explains so much in my game. I love that. And now I'm thinking about it every time I hit that slice forehand. It's fantastic.
What is your game style? What do you what's your strengths and weaknesses?
Ooh, I am definitely an impatient player. If I can end the point in 4 balls, I will. And I'm definitely an attacker. I play aggressively and I move towards the net. I love finishing the point out at net, and even with an approach shot, that's kind of my favorite go-to. In terms of weaknesses, definitely I would say the impatience is definitely the biggest one because the shot selection, I understand the strategies, but part of me doesn't want to listen to that and just kind of go for it. So that's definitely, something that I still work on to this day, and try to convince myself that, okay, it's okay to go to 5 shots, 6 shots. It's okay. We're good. So that's definitely, yeah. And in college, I got a chance to play doubles also because you get to play both if it suits. And that's when I really discovered how much I love doubles because you don't really train that when you're growing up either. It's always singles focused. And unless you find a great doubles partner for tournaments, you're not really in the right headspace and understanding that game. So I definitely fell in love with doubles also.
Yeah, and that's also a sport in itself, right? Like different strategies, different approach to the team format, communication with your partner and so on. So I think sometimes, people don't realize how different that is. You can't just like take your singles game and just go and play doubles. You have to adapt.
Exactly. That's, the big Empire Cups that would happen throughout the year for junior players. You would sign up with like your favorite player that you like practicing with, but you realize that your games don't complement each other. You have no idea how to work together to build the point out and to work to your strengths. Doubles is such a unique strategical play, and there's so many different ways to play the point and to take advantage of the shot. Um, so it's mind blowing. It's a whole new different game, and again, it comes back to you. It's still the individual sport. You have to play the best tennis that you can, communicate well with your opponent. Even if you're not feeling it, you still have to pretend or present yourself that you are. It's quite a whole. It's really fascinating. It's a shame that it's underrated.
Yeah, why do you think that is? Do you think there's something we can do as tennis people in the tennis industry, whatever, to push doubles a bit more or make it more of a, engaging? I mean, because there's been teams or situations where doubles been pretty high, hot at the moment, but then it kind of fades again, right? Do you have any ideas there?
Yeah, I think it's always there's something in the culture of sporting events where, even in teams, there's always a few players on that team that stand out. And I think it comes back to our idea that like each of us has something, could be that great person, and we all want to experience that greatness. So seeing someone in singles being able to do it all by themselves, even though there's a team in the box, it's them. They're the ones on the court. They're the one executing it. It's like a showmanship and an inspiration to like what we as individuals can get to. And in doubles, I feel like it's underrated because you're a team, and there's less happening, and the points aren't 25 shots long, and it doesn't go to 5 sets or crazy, any other external things. And the media attention also plays a very, very big role in that as well. Um, I think it's similar to women's tennis, honestly. When you see it live, you respect it a lot more. It's just one of those things that you don't understand how fun it is and how enjoyable it is to watch until you're there. And so we need to just get more people into those stadiums where the doubles are, maybe, okay, free entry, you're already on the ground, there's a match happening, go this way, we'll give you a free little magnet or something, go watch some doubles, get them through the door to enjoy this experience. Why not?
Yeah, I think like most things, and you make a good point. Like tennis is best viewed live because on TV sometimes, depending on the angle, like I don't like these birds view. Some tournaments have really high up angles, and it looks like they're playing slow motion tennis. It does looks like pickleball, right? So, I think it's sad sometimes that they don't mix the angles more or try to get closer to it, so it gets more of that live vibe where you see how fast it is, explosive on both women's, men's, and doubles, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, take football, for example, or any other sport where, you have a fan watching from behind a TV and someone's yelling at the TV, like, oh, he should have thrown it that way, or like, well, that was a terrible call. Like, okay, one, it's much different. It's much faster. You're staring at it from behind a screen. So it's a little, like, everything's a little bit different when you're not there in person. And in tennis specifically, you don't appreciate how fast the ball is going until you see for yourself how quickly they're moving, the racket speed, the top spin, how it's just mind blowing tennis, truly. I mean, you hear the serve stats for Ben Shelton being in the 140s, and you're like, that's ridiculous. But you don't see it. So you don't really know what it's like to stand against that and try to return it, until you're watching it happen.
Yeah, you need to get it kind of on that grassroots level where it feels more like okay, you can see it with your own eyes instead of just like getting that kind of highlights or just some screen somewhere where you don't really get immersed in it that much, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we could do a much better job on that.
Yep. New generation, hopefully. So I'm thinking about like this. So you talked about your playing style, and I think that is common to a lot of people listening, but a lot of tennis players in general that we're impatient, right? We want to end the point. Do you think that comes from kind of like personality, or it's just instinctual, or do you think it's just something about teaching yourself more patience and strategy. I mean, you know the strategy, as you said. So, and same here, I can read the game, but then I still want to finish it in 4 points. I don't know if I watched too much of Roger Federer. I don't know what happened, but but it's like it's something you have to really work on.
That's a great question. I do think it's more personality based and your competitive nature and just the way you perceive the sport. For me, it was always like I had to prove that I was worthy of being in the room and part of the tennis world. You know, I didn't grow up in the same status that everyone around me who played tennis did. So it was like, all right, guys, like don't count me out. I'm just as good and qualified. Like here I am. So I felt like I embodied that in my tennis game as well. Whereas other players, you know, they're just more comfortable back there and they know that they can drive you out and they don't mind. They love the sport so much that they're enjoying it. They're like, yeah, I'll hit another forehand. Cool. Oh, you put me that way? Great. I'll run it down. No problem. You know, so maybe it is a little bit of a personality and it is also the coaching. I mean, it's a combination of everything. I think what you focus on in your lessons, it plays true to what you're expecting to perceive in a match. So if you're focusing a lot on your approach shot and your net game, you're probably going to look to see if you can take advantage of anything and move forward. Whereas like, okay, let's see how many times you can hit to 100. Like, let's see which team can get to 100 first. Then you might play a more consistent tournament that week, you know. But I do think it stems from the kind of personality and the way you perceive the sport and what you want to do with it, and your own presence for sure.
Yeah, it's I think it's a mix. Like, because I mean, I really appreciate, beautiful looking tennis, and then you try to imitate, but if you have limited, like, I mean, no one can play like Federer. Like, for example, you grew up watching a lot of Fed matches, and you appreciate his style, you appreciate other players, but then if you mimic too much, then you know that the stats go against you. Like, attacking tennis is generally not so smart if you want to win matches, because it's like you really need to hit that purple patch or have a good day,
Right.
And I wanted to ask you also, on that note, you said, talked about your background there. Like, how did you get into tennis? Do you have parents playing tennis, or was this more like you are the tennis bear in the family, or how did it happen?
My mom always played recreationally, but she was never an athlete, so to speak. It was more just for fun. My dad was an athletic child. He made it pretty well in handball, actually. Um, but tennis kind of was just a family outing that we would just go out and play when it was a nice day, and they saw that I was getting competitive and excited about being on the court, so they put me in a few recreational lessons in my local town, which basically meant an indoor basketball court with a makeshift net. Um, and that's when the competitive nature really stood out. I wanted to be the best one there. And my form didn't look great, but I was hitting the ball strong and I was competing well when we were playing king of the court, you know, in little at 6 years old, whatever that could mean. And eventually I grew out of that. So it went from the basketball court to an outdoor tennis lesson. And the person who put these lessons together ended up coaching me privately for a little bit. And then he said, you know what, like that, I think she needs another level. And that's ultimately how I got to my club, where I trained from around 9, 10 years old, all the way through high school, and where I was coaching when I was a teenager. So yeah, I mean, it all kind of started out in the air, just having fun, and it went from there. I couldn't get enough.
That's great. That's a tennis love story in a way, right? I think this happens for a lot of, like, you kind of fall in love, then you can fall out of love with the sport and go back in. Did that ever happen to you where you had like a period where you're like, okay, no more tennis. I had too much tennis.
Absolutely. When I first started playing tournaments, I didn't realize how individual the game was. I was practicing with people throughout the week, and then on the weekends, we were biting each other's heads off. And it wasn't fun. I didn't understand the social aspect of the game. And, you know, I'm spending all this time outside of school playing tennis. So I didn't really have too big of a social life. Like it was always give and take. And I felt really, I was struggling a lot in the social aspect of the sport and I didn't quite enjoy it as much. And it was frustrating that every weekend, you know, even second place, you're disappointed. one player comes out on top, and as a little kid, that's like, that should have been me, or it was right on my racket, or, sometimes losing first round is better, it's like, okay, at least I have a day to recover, enjoy my Sunday, Saturday, and then I'll get back to training the next time, or like I'll hit for a little bit, but whatever. Sometimes that's better. And then it was like, that doesn't make sense. I'm supposed to win. Like this is a competitive sport. So it was very difficult growing up. It was definitely an uphill battle. And in middle school, I really wanted to stop playing tournaments. Almost immediately as I started them, I wanted to stop. And it was when I got to high school when I started playing for a team, and I really loved the game again. And I kept playing. I played more tournaments, and I was trying to balance it with the team, and I was making sacrifices, and I knew I wasn't going to build my ranking as far as everyone else because I was choosing high school, but I also knew that it would help me in the long run enjoy the sport more. I even joined track and field in the spring, and I threw the discus because that's sort of like a forehand, but you're spinning, and that was a lot of fun for me, and it made me like tennis again. I just found different ways to connect with the sport, because I didn't want to lose that part of me. It was so much who I was, even in the school, it was like Leah's the tennis person. Like it became who I was. So college was an absolute must for me. I wanted to keep playing more competitively. My high school team, we definitely competed well, but we were small and we only made it so far. Whereas college, it felt like a whole new window of opportunity for a team sport and to be carried with other players at my level, and even better. And that was the greatest year and a half of my life until COVID happened. But either way, tennis has always been a roller coaster of a ride for me, and it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's the right spirit. I think like a lot of people struggle sometimes with the anxiety of being alone on a tennis court and the pressures that come with it. Like from internal pressures, could be external pressures, but you can see a guy like Kyrgios, for example. There's examples on the WTA tour as well, like where you see them in a team setting and everything just feels more natural. Like they feel more like, okay,
Yeah.
I have a team behind me, I have a team I play for. But playing alone feels strange and feels like, who am I playing for here? Only myself, and the anxiety gets too much. Was is that a little bit how you felt?
Yeah, and I think that stands true to why I enjoyed doubles so much when I got to college, because I never played it to that level before, and had someone next to me, and I think there was also a shift. I remember there was one match in high school, a state sectional match, and it was quite far from home, so my family didn't come, but the other team was very much their families were all over. And you could just feel the intensity from the parents of the girl that I was playing against. And it was like watching myself sort of like you're just picturing yourself with all these external pressures and seeing how that could get to someone. And it's like, wow, how we've come so far from picking up a racket to now feeling pressured to compete well in this sport that we all share in common. And it was like, I need to find a way to enjoy it again because it is such a beautiful sport. It's a sport you for life. You don't need 14,000 people on a field to compete. You need one other person and sometimes just a wall. And it's beautiful, and I'm thankful for it. And it builds a different kind of person, which I think is quite interesting. But in Yeah, I think when you learn to appreciate how much it's how amazing the sport is, that's when you really fall in love with it again. And it's always coming back to that.
Yeah, I think that's what people come back. I have a lot of people like when I do racket consultations and stuff that's been gone for 10 years, 5 years. But when they get back to it, their passion is stronger than ever because they realize a little bit what was missing or how good it feels to hit a ball again. Like it's just even if it's not competitive, just that feeling of just hitting for an hour or 2 hours is kind of like stress relief in a way, right? Like you're in the zone, you cannot think about anything else. You're just there with the tennis ball. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, I feel like as long as you've committed to the lessons for a certain period of time, whether it doesn't matter what age, if you've built this into a routine, you find it's like a meditative state, like you're just hitting the ball, trying to get a rhythm, and just escaping reality for X amount of time. I heard a really interesting stat this past week that somewhere around 6 million people try tennis every year, but only 1 million of those people actually stay with it.
Hmm.
So we're getting people in the door. People are recognizing the beauty of tennis and they want to give it a shot, but it's a matter of like finding that piece and finding what it can do to you. And I think that's super, super interesting.
Yeah, I discussed that with a guy. We were playing pretty advanced player, but then and then we were walking around and we saw some beginners on the court next to us, and it's like, oh, that, or they were like a family and they were hitting like mother, and father and son or something, and it looked like, oh, how miserable that is when you can't really properly hit the ball, and that is like that's the issue with tennis. Sometimes it's like it's beautifully deep in the terms, like you can spend a whole lifetime trying to perfect your forehand serve, whatever, but then like the starting stretch is so long, right? Like it's just to get to that point where you're actually enjoying the hitting process is quite long. So I think that's not so strange that one like a sixth of the people are like, no, no, not for me.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think that's why kids who grow up playing tennis end up somehow circulated in it and want to go to the tournaments live and see it because they spent part of their lives where they don't really remember much anyways dedicated to the sport, and now it's like ingrained in them, whereas an adult trying to pick it up and find a groove and make it sociable and get a little exercise, it's tough. It's a really tough sport to pick up, especially with no other athletic background, very minimal if you've never used an external equipment to do something before. Serving in particular is the wildest thing to me. When in your day-to-day life are you throwing something up and trying to go after it? Aside from volleyball players, like no one's doing that motion. So that's something you're learning from scratch and can be extremely frustrating, especially when you throw in a continental grip, which wouldn't make sense at first. It's like I just want to smack it that way, but I have to hit it from the side. Like it's wild. It's crazy. So respect to anyone who does pick it up in their adult life, truly.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good way of putting it. And I think it's like, I think the rewards are there if you persist, but it's very easy to be like, okay, I'm gonna play golf, or which is even harder maybe in some ways. But like, or pickleball, maybe it's a bit easier. Paddle in Europe, quite popular. So the sun is coming out after a whole day of rain. It's like straight the timing. I'm gonna like have a
It's because you
sunscreen on.
mentioned pickleball.
Yeah, the sun comes out
Yeah.
always when you talk about pickleball. Have you played pickleball, by the way? I don't want to get into the pickleball hate, but have you tried it?
I'll say unfortunately I have. I respect it. I don't think it should be comparable to tennis, honestly. It's a fun game. It's a little tiny mini sport thing that's happening and it's great, but it's not like we're like second cousins. It's cool to have you in the family, great racket sport, but not for everybody.
Yeah, it feels more like a beach, like something you bring on a picnic. You bring
Yeah.
like, let's bring this a picnic sport. It's like, oh yeah, we here's a patch of grass and we have a net and this is a now we play. That's how I feel about it, right? It's a bit like
Yeah,
that.
it should be. It just seems so leisurely. The sound that the ball makes against the paddle and just the scoring and the how quickly everything happens and especially to a tennis player. I mean, there's little movement, so to speak. There's not as much of an athletic challenge there, so it seems so leisurely. It doesn't come with any consequence, I don't think.
Yeah, and usually, like, if I do something, I've tried it. I mean, I even played some tournaments, and like I try to respect everything, but you feel like, okay, this is kind of, I respect the depth and difficulty of tennis, so this is not for me. I can enjoy. I can see why some people enjoy it. It's pretty easy, And then some people come in the comments if I say something, and they'll be like, "Oh, you haven't seen Ben Johns play Jack Sock?" Like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I have. I have actually watched that on YouTube, and I still it's still only like someone rushing to the net and like dick dock and hopefully not being passed, or it's like it's impressive in the way that they move around the net, but it's also a little bit lame compared to a tennis match. Sorry.
Right.
Just
Also, I think it's really strange, especially for my kind of game where I like to challenge the net and come forward. You're telling me I have to stay behind this line that I can't actually close in? Like that seems unfair to me.
yeah, yeah. The kitchen thing is the tough. Like when you stay and you have to really like keep your feet planted just like outside the line, and then you have to reach in and dink the ball. I'm like, what is this? I just want to finish the point.
Exactly, exactly. Which is why it's surprising to me that tennis players have moved to pickleball instead of like Padel, for example, in Europe. Like that's so much more tennis and exciting, and the ball's kind of going everywhere. And I feel like that's more intensive and more up our tennis player alley than pickleball. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's in the US probably it's a money thing a little bit. Like I mean, if you're a tennis player,
Mm.
and also it's on the hype train, right? So people are like hyping it up. You know, it's like a thing where okay, this is now the new thing to do. And if you're maybe Jack Sock or Sam Querrey or whatever, you're like, okay, I get money to do this. This is half or less 15% of the work I have to put in as a tennis player. You can play some like invitational events, some PTP A tour, whatever it's called, and I can understand it's good. Money is nice, and you have some exercise, so so
That's
that's pretty
true.
good.
That's true. I mean, yeah, especially as the players age, I guess pickleball would be the easier option for them.
Yeah, but I have a lot of like friends that are ex pros, like top 150 to 200, that really got into paddle or padel, but they really into it. So that transition is quite common in Europe, I would say. Maybe not so much in States now, but might be in 2, 3, 4 years. Who knows, right?
Yeah, I actually tried it for the first time in January and I never wanted to leave. It was mind-blowing. The Padel is just unbelievable. Like that's a new little spark in me, getting me back on the tennis court too. Like it just all comes back. So I definitely didn't have that first love, love at first sight experience with pickleball.
No, no, it's very different. Like, and also if you like to, close in on the net and play doubles, like then paddle is as close to kind of tennis doubles as you can get, except that there's wall. There are walls and the courts are smaller, but at least you have that back and forth, and you need to be really fast with your reflexes and stuff at the net, which is fun. It's fun points always, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely it's challenging in a new exciting way, but also a manageable excitement because I'm athletic enough to be able to handle that pace and that pressure.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to get into that question as well. How much tennis do you have to watch? Or do you have to? Or are you watching? It depends on what race you like. Like sometimes like watching too much tennis can be intense. My father watches a lot of tennis, and I'm like, are you still watching tennis? Like I cannot watch. I have to ask questions.
Yeah, I know some people who have tennis channel running 24/7 and obviously in our offices that's what's going on behind us. For me personally, I think I tune into the really great matchups that I'd like to see. Like Grigor Dimitrov played Sebastian Korda the other day. Like I knew that was one that you had to watch. Otherwise, it just feels like I'm more in the know and I get to pick and choose, and it's nice to stay in the happenings of the tennis world because even when I was playing, I didn't spend too much time thinking about the pros until it was the slams. Even the 1000s events, honestly, I didn't spend too much time until I got to like the semis and the finals. So it's really nice to have that behind the scenes and really get in depth with the players and how their seasons are going. And I feel like I understand more about the professional game from my seat, but thankfully, my job requirement does not include watching tennis on a loop. So I'm still good in the clear for that.
Yeah, it can be heavy. Like I go to some tournaments every year, and it's fun to watch it live. And then you watch a lot of tennis, right? Like you watch, but you're around the locker rooms. You get to play sometimes on the courts if I'm lucky. So that's always fun. But it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, after 3 days of watching live tennis, you're like, what match is this? And then it's like 60 versus 90 in the world. You're like, maybe lunch is better at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. Being in the tennis atmosphere and, especially making the trip out to the tournaments, you absolutely take advantage. You're watching every match, you're looking through the schedule, you're like, "Yep, I want to hit all of these courts and then some." But you take a relaxing break, especially after the Australian Open with the hours if you're not over there. It's definitely nice to not have to stay up for all of those matches, but to get to pick and choose which ones I am staying up or maybe waking up earlier for.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Do you have any favorite players you like to follow, like on both tours?
Well, I have to shout out Sinner and Sabalenka, honestly. I've been a fan of theirs since before they really made the scene. Sinner especially, I think, when Alcaraz blew up, people kind of neglected that Sinner was one of the only players on tour that could actually give him a run for his money at the time. And I think the dedication, his coaching team, the mindset that they have, where even when he's competing, they're not afraid to experiment and try new things. and really learn something new about his game and um, what he's capable of. It's just a true testament to how he was able to win this last slam. And so I've been a fan of his since before the Kuroda boys. I'm sorry, the original carrot over here. um,
Yeah, yeah,
and
good.
Sabalenka, I think, yeah, I think she's been an absolute rock star since she first came onto the scene. Yeah, she didn't really have a serve, but you could tell that her frustration was driven by her passion and her drive to find this improvement. And as soon as that serve clicked, there was no stopping her. She was a completely different animal. So those two are for sure. I mean, it's by chance that they both just won the Open, but I've been watching them for a while now.
Yeah, they're entertaining players to watch, because it's like kind of spectacular how much power they can both generate with consistency, And I think that was pretty much the theme. With Sinner, you see, like he's always in balance. Like he's always in balance. He's always belts the ball back, no matter who's on the other side of the net. And Sabalenka as well, like she just goes for everything, and he wins 6-2, 6-3 every match. It seems like it's just when does this stop? How don't you start
Exactly.
missing at some point?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why I respect her so much too, is because she does attack everything. Women's tennis has always been more of the aggressive playing style to begin with, but her game style specifically is it's like the next level, two levels up from what I ever could. And it's just so cool to see that, she did it, and it makes me want to get out there and pound some tennis balls also.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's kind of refreshing in a way that you can do it because like you from a math point of view, like I said before, like the way like Djokovic plays or more, defensive players who are like masters at managing the whole court, the movement and everything, uh, it looks a lot more taxing, but it's obviously a better at in the tennis math, right? Like you're reducing your unforced errors. And you've seen matches on both tours, obviously, when some players just going and it's just everything's going out, or it's like the unforced errors are too high. But to be able to sustain it for a long period, like she has, is very impressive.
Yeah, especially, and I think that's a great point to make, especially in men's tennis, where everything is played more from the baseline, and you're playing the longer points, and you're working your high percentage shots, which is why Federer was so exciting to watch because he was more of an aggressive player. He had a very stable baseline game, but he was always moving forward, and he wasn't afraid to challenge you a little bit more. Whereas Novak stays far back, Nadal's even farther. So it's really fascinating that the big three names in tennis history all have different game styles and all perceive the court differently and play to their strengths differently. All around, it's truly fascinating the type of players that come through the tour.
Yeah, I think the contrast in tennis is the most important, right? So you have actually like players with different styles, look different. You kind of you want some different personalities, so you can have someone to root for, and your neighbor can have someone to root for. And it's also the contrasting styles of play that it makes a tennis match the best to watch, usually, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every so often you get a player with a crazy grip and a crazy form, and something looks wild when they hit, and it's like, okay, I kind of want to see what happens. Kyrgios hits an underhand serve every so often, Bublik will smash a racket. Everyone does something different, and it's so exciting. I feel like in the past 5 or so years, the tour, the personalities of the players have been shown on court, not just off. And I think that's what's really exciting people to watch and to tune into these matches also.
I agree. What do you think of the coming storylines now? Like, so we're going towards the Sunshine Double now. It's getting closer at least, but we have some big events before that. Like, which players do you think would be successful in the coming months before summer? Do you have a feeling?
That's a great question. Honestly, I know Rune has been struggling a lot recently, but his determination and his mindset and I want to say arrogance, but it's more confidence in himself and his self belief. I really think that he's starting to find his voice on the court, and channeling that more strategically than as just like, look at me, I'm the next one to watch. So I feel like he's definitely someone to keep an eye on. I think Dimitrov is running a great 2024, and you could just feel his excitement that something's finally clicking. So I really hope that he makes a deep run here in the Sunshine Double. As for the women, I hate to say it, but I don't think Swiatek is I feel like everyone's catching up to her at this point. So I think she's playing more of like I gotta defend my number one status and my streaks and everything that I've built because everyone seems to be playing catch up. Whereas other players are really finding their voice. I would love to see. Ooh, oh, I have her face, but not her name. Okay, there's just there's so many good players. There's Noskova and Yastremska who both made a deep run at Australian Open. They're playing with a lot more confidence, especially going into the bigger tournaments now. I feel like they're playing more like I belong here as opposed to like let me see how far I can get. So that's going to be interesting to see how those younger, newer players can make it through. Mira Andreeva, she's always one to watch. I mean, the teenager is playing unbelievable tennis and she's made it deep runs. She's taken out big players. She's building that confidence. So she's definitely one to watch moving forward as well.
Yeah, I think it's pretty exciting time now because like the Australian Open was great. I think it's hard to argue against that. Says like it was a very good advertising vehicle for tennis because we had good storylines. Final men's side was 5 sets. Sabalenka went through the whole draw, but there were a lot of upsets on the women's side, made it interesting as well. Like a lot of new names, so that was a good tournament, which makes the whole now like the whole calendar quite open. Even on the men's side, like before it was like, okay, Novak, 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 Novak. But now it's not like, okay, we have Sinner. Where is Alcaraz? Is going to come back? Is before the clay or on the clay? Rafa is coming back as well. So that's a good one. And on the women's side, like you said, there's so many new names that are making waves. And then the question is like Swiatek, will she dominate? When it goes on clay, yes, maybe. But there's so many players that now feel like, okay, I can beat her. She's not unbeatable because if you go through that phase, you might build up that confidence. But now she's maybe not as mentally stable or superior or feeling that kind of wave of confidence. So I think this will be pretty exciting tennis months to come, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the men's side is catching up to the women's, whereas literally anybody could walk away the winner of that match. And it's really exciting. I mean, I didn't even mention Adele, and I'm so excited that he's coming back. I hope it's the right call. I really do, because we'd love to see another clay season, out of him, and especially the Olympics. But yeah, it's just truly we're in for a treat. I know everyone talks about who's going to be the next big three, and always comparing back to what these three incredible players have accomplished in the past years of tour. But I think we're entering a new stage of the game where, we kind of want to see a little bit of everyone fighting for that chance to make it big. And we're in for an exciting ride for sure. This is definitely the year to be a tennis fan.
Yeah, I think so. I think tennis is doing well. I was worried for a while, right? But like then I guess might have hurt your tennis plans and many others. But I talked to Carousel just like 2 days ago, and he stopped during COVID, and now he's back on tour. So it's we all had a bit of a break from it, whatever, during that time. But
Right.
now tennis is doing really well. It seems like even without Roger, Rafa is back, and it's like open, and there's so many exciting new names. So I think hopefully we can make it justice. And hopefully, like for example, WTA Tour have had some issues with, the last finals didn't seem to be the best tournament in history, and hopefully they can get their stuff together also for this year, so we have like a proper calendar where like a clear schedule and so on.
Yeah, I think the good news is that there's high expectations. Tennis is really the players are stepping up to the plate and there's a lot of great tennis to watch. And it's like, okay, now the rest of us need to respect that and establish a world and a community and the stadium and the sites that really elevate and want us to come watch and support in person. We There's a lot of fun happening, but it would be like the cherry on top if tournaments could actually present it as such and make it more accessible, more fun for fans, especially who actually live there, newbies to the sport. It's such a great window to get everyone through the door.
Do you think there's something we're missing as an industry or as a sport, like in way we could sell the sport better to partly to beginning players? Like I've discussed this on the podcast before, maybe using green balls or starting it,
Mhm.
making it easier, but then also packaging it in a more entertaining way to also the consumer who actually watches tennis, maybe not playing tennis, but watches a lot of tennis.
Yeah, I think that tennis. is still very much considered, the elite sport aside right alongside golf. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. But I think golf has done a much better job of bringing in the next generation and new players and more excitement. And I feel like tennis keeps going from extreme to extreme. So there are some players on tour like, yeah, we want those, crazy stadium crowds, like let fans do whatever. And then everyone else is like, why? Like, I love that we're the only respectable, crowd out here in a stadium setting. And I feel like there's a middle ground that could easily be attainable, accessible. Especially with the media also, I feel like there's a much better way to draw in the younger crowd as opposed to, the old way of explaining tennis and commentating about tennis and the desks, the live desks, the news desk. I feel like everyone across the board could be doing a better job bringing new voices, letting, like Kyrgios, for example, is a great example. He doesn't care. He's going to speak his mind and he knows that people will listen. He knows that that's the brand that he's building and that he has a following, and everywhere he goes, his fans are going to go. And it's just about letting that next voice be come in and be broadcast and not be afraid to let them speak their minds as opposed to staying to this kind of almost a script that we've been hearing for the same I don't know how many decades, tennis is evolving. There's more than just the reminiscing of what was. It's like, oh my God, look at what is and what could be. And I feel like as if we can get more of those voices in the tennis world, talking to the fans and players, we can definitely we have a whole new sport.
Yeah, it's a great take. I think that's important. Like, and also to just let the sport be itself, right, and have its own personality. I think sometimes everybody wants to protect it from, whatever. Like they just want to keep it tennis as it is, and that's sometimes good. But you have to do a little bit of both. You have to do some push and pull, right? So you do let it
Right.
evolve a bit, but also maintain some maybe traditions or some of the good stuff. Like so, Wimbledon can be Wimbledon, but then let the crowd be rowdy at the Australian Open, then see who can deal with that, or New York, So I think that is pretty good that they have different flares in different tournaments. So like, okay, if I'm gonna go there, I know it's gonna be, I have to deal with the crowd which I don't have to do over there. So that's a bit of a
Right.
fun
Just
contrast.
yeah, absolutely. Just as like the court surfaces change, the weather's different, you're in different peaks. Even tennis fashion, for example, there's always been the okay, no, it should stay more classy or oh, I like the new style and the cuts and everything. Like fashion has really been taking a leg up in the last few years and evolving and even the Rafa shorts and like the sleeveless and there's always been some sort of trend and there's always some push and pull but either way there's flexibility there and people want to see new things and they want to see the crazy colors and the crazy cuts and who's going to wear what like that we should extend that feeling to other parts of the sport and even holistically.
Yeah, I think it's like diversity in the sport is good. Like with like different contrasting styles, personalities, everything. The more varied it can be, the more exciting it probably will be, and the bigger the audience it will reach, probably. So I think that is the important part of just letting it be itself and its own personality, but embracing diversity in the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we're seeing it this year especially. And the fans are starting to get into it more. The Croata boys are a great example. We had the Polish king at the Australian Open. Like we're getting somewhere. We're making progress and we're all here for it so far. It's looking good. As long as we don't push it too far, we can go up this trend. So it'll be fun to
100%.
see.
Do you have any travel planned? Which tournaments are you attending this year? You have any schedule ideas?
Yeah, great question. Probably, I'm trying to see if I can get to Miami, but that might be a next year situation. Wimbledon, I'm hoping to get to. There's the City Open, Cincinnati. I haven't hit those two yet in the States. I keep going outward. I got to stay in a little bit. US Open's a classic. You'll definitely be seeing me there. And I'm hoping to catch the Laver Cup also, the big team event. I that's an underrated one where you get all the top players in the world competing. It's great matches. It's a great time, and that will be an exciting one. I hear good things.
Yeah, I was there in 2019. It was amazing. Like Roger Alpha, just the production level was so high that you're like,
Yeah.
oh, this is the way tennis should be. Just the, the introductions of the players, and yeah, everything was just spot on. So it was like nice as a tennis fan to see it, being done like that.
Yeah, especially at the end of the year after the last slam, when things are winding down, people forget that there's crazy matches still going on. And I think as opposed to like tuning in for the 250, 500 events, you tune in for the Labor Cup and the finals at the end of the year, the bigger wrapping up team events. It's a great time.
That's great. Leah, I know you have a busy schedule ahead, but I have one last question, which I think should be a now a standard question. So, what racket are you using?
Great question. Uh, I use the Head MP Instinct.
It's a good stick
I, yeah, yeah. It treats me right. I can't complain. It looks nice too. That's always a bonus.
and
And
strings
oh, strings are the RPM Blast.
and
Yeah.
tension. Then last one.
49.
Ah, good, good. Yeah, the tensions are dropping. I'm doing that video tonight, like because you get these tension sheets from Dallas Open, and overall, like the tensions are just keep on go. I mean, nobody plays maybe as low as Manarino, but generally they're going down big time. So
Yeah, I felt it myself too. I didn't really know when I was first starting out, but I found out my tension was at like 59, and I was like, wait a second, what if you just keep moving it down, you play around with it. It's a cool trend to see also on that
yeah,
end.
I think it's better for everyone's arms and stuff like that because otherwise you're
Yeah,
gonna have
absolutely.
pretty high stiffness.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks a lot, Leah. It's been great talking to you. I really wish you a great tennis year, and I hope to see you in some of the events. I will be traveling a bit as well, so maybe we can hit some balls at some point in some location.
Absolutely. I would love that. Let's get a clay court out there.
Yes, vamos.